Georgia O'Connor here, big up Julius, Ring IQ, welcome to the relay.
Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. On the heels of his most recent loss to Liam Beefy Smith, Chris Eubank Jr. says, I felt like I was dominating, then I got caught. I'm still the better fighter.
Hard to reconcile a statement like that based on this past weekend's contest.
The outcome of the match. A tough night? No, I wouldn't even say that. I was having fun. I was landing my shots. I was enjoying the moment. Eubank exclusively told Sky Sports from his dressing room post-fight, and he caught me with a once-in-a-lifetime shot. I got up, I recovered, he put it on me again with a few more shots, and the referee decided it was enough. I felt like I could go on. I felt like I was aware of what was happening, but it was the referee's decision, and I have to respect it.
Chris Eubank Jr. in his own mind thinks that he could have gone on.
No.
From the inside looking out, but from the outside looking in, this was a man who didn't have his legs under him. Anybody could see that.
After the first knockdown, I felt like I was dominating the fight before that happened, so I think we've got an exciting opportunity at some point in the future to have that rematch. Listen, it's boxing. It's a sexy sport. This is the sport we love. Anything can happen. I never would have believed this could happen.
I didn't believe it would myself. I myself went with Chris Eubank Jr. to win this thing.
I think a lot of people didn't see this happening, and it happened, but that's okay. I'm okay with it. It's part of the journey, and I've still got a lot left, so we'll see what happens later on in the year. He had good hand speed, but it was that one sequence of shots. He threw a bunch of shots, and one of them landed, and it dazed me. I felt before that I was in control of the fight.
I felt that Chris Eubank Jr. was in control too. The first round might have been a tight round where it was hard to separate them, but the second and third rounds were clearly Chris Eubank Jr. rounds.
At the end of the third, I felt that he was in control of the match and potentially en route to stopping Liam Smith. And that's not what happened. What happened was the exact opposite of what we come to expect from a Chris Eubank Jr. fight. Widely regarded for
being able to take a punch and packing a hard punch of his own, coupled with his athleticism and his engine, you really don't expect that Chris gets stopped. He might get outboxed.
Like he did opposite the ring George Groves, like he did opposite the ring Billy Joe Saunders. He might get outpointed, he might get outboxed, but stop.
Come on, be honest. How many people were expecting Chris Eubank Jr. to get stopped?
That third round, I was picking my shots, and no disrespect, but every dog has its day. This was Liam's night, and I respect him. There's losing a fight and losing a fight. I was dominating the fight, and then I got caught. So to me, I'm still able to perform, and in my mind, I'm still the better fighter. Obviously, I don't have much of an argument after the loss, but I have an argument to prove I am the better fighter. It was a shot that landed, and it's a fight I think the fans will still want to see further down the line.
Yeah, they might. There's talk of Chris Eubank Jr. having a rematch clause ahead of this thing, and I wasn't even aware there was a rematch clause in play.
This not being a world title fight or even a world title eliminator, the fight itself read more like a prelude.
And that's not a knock on Liam Beefy Smith, but let's be honest.
The fight itself seemed more like just an appetizer for the main course, a prelude before something bigger happens, before Chris goes into a bigger fight, whether it's a Kell Brook fight or revisiting the Conor Benn fight or maybe getting Gennady Golovkin in the ring.
Something along those lines.
And that's not a knock on Liam Smith, who I think is the more ambitious fighter of the two.
Stylistically, you must admit that Liam Beefy Smith's base style is tailor-made for Chris Eubank Jr.
At least on paper it was. Liam Smith himself wants Eubank rematch in Liverpool. More money and maybe a catch weight of 157 pounds.
They say there's a rematch clause in play.
But are the terms for a second fight, are the terms for a rematch actually set, or does Liam Smith actually have some bargaining power? Liam Smith is contractually obligated to an immediate rematch with Chris Eubank Jr. The former WBO junior middleweight champion possesses some leverage. However, now that he has knocked out Eubank in the fourth round, the 34-year-old Smith detailed during his post-fight press conference late Saturday night in Manchester, England, some of his terms for a second showdown with Eubank. Just Obviously, like I said, Liverpool, Smith said in reference to the rematch taking place in his hometown. Obviously, the money changes now. I might drag him down to 157 pounds.
A lot of people might think that all of this boils down to ideologies, but what it really boils down to is what was agreed upon.
What did they iron out? What did they put down on paper? Are the terms for a second fight already set? Because if they're not, then Liam might very well have some bargaining power. The contract weight for their fight Saturday night at a sold-out AO arena in Manchester was the middleweight limit of 160 pounds. Eubank previously agreed to box rival Conor Benn at a catch weight of 157 for their high-profile fight, which was scheduled October 8th at the O2 Arena in London.
I'll tell you this now. Chris Eubank Jr. better not box Liam Smith at 157 pounds.
If they've got to throw Liam Smith a little bit more cash in order to make him come off of that demand, then that's what they need to do, because it doesn't behoove Chris Eubank Jr. to come in a pound under 160.
Let alone 157. His punch resistance is already waning.
It's very unusual to see Chris Eubank Jr. go down like that off the first hard shot that lands.
The first one that landed.
It's very unusual and uncharacteristic of Chris Eubank Jr. If he were to boil down to 157 pounds, he'd be a dead man walking.
Dead meat.
Again, I said last week, Smith said. I said 2 weeks ago. I said 3 weeks ago. 4. I beat him once, I'll beat him again. So it's not a problem, but this has to be right for me now, and on my terms, you know? It's not really about Smith Eubank Jr. sign, but a few other things have got to be on my terms, and we don't really know here and now just how much bargaining power Liam Beefy Smith has, because if there's a rematch clause in place,
that doesn't necessarily mean they covered all the other bases, like the contracted weight for a rematch, the money.
At the time that the terms of engagement for the first fight were ironed out, they may not have covered those bases on the premise that everyone was expecting Chris to win.
Is the weight for a second fight, the contracted weight for a rematch, is that set, or is it open to negotiation?
And the money. Liam Beefy Smith may very well be willing to face Chris Eubank Jr. at 160 pounds for a second time, so long as you pay him, and pay him handsomely.
You better.
As stated, we don't know if the terms for a second fight have already been ironed out, or does Liam Smith have bargaining power.
They shouldn't let this fester. They should be able to get these two boys back out there, at minimum, in the summer months.
They should. These two guys ain't the oldest guys out there, but they certainly aren't the youngest. They're both in their mid-30s. They ain't got time to waste. You can make some money with this thing,
but you've got to move on it fast.
Don't hesitate, and don't wait till fall of this year rolls around. That's time squandered, and time is a luxury that neither Liam Smith or Chris Eubank Jr. have.
What can Chris do differently in a second fight that he didn't do in a fight?
He can start by not getting knocked out.
Thank you for that, Captain Obvious.
Will Roy Jones Jr. still be in Chris Eubank Jr.'s corner for a second fight, for a rematch? And if he isn't, is that better or worse?
Roy was a great fighter. He really was. One of the best. And a great commentator, too. But a trainer, as a trainer.
Well, you guys see what happened. In men's light heavyweight news, Frank Warren tweeted, "Anthony picking up 3 world title belts on Saturday night would be one of the biggest thrills of my time in boxing, and it is something I am confident of seeing happen."
Is that confidence or is that wishful thinking?
Unique dichotomy in this matchup. You know, Artur Beterbiev is Uncle Bob's fighter. Uncle Bob's good friends with Frank Warren.
Thus, he's willing to loan him out to his old buddy, Frank Warren,
for a fight that will be shown here in America by way of Bob's broadcast partner, ESPN. It's a win-win for everybody.
Sort of.
Queensberry Promotions is at the helm of promotion for this fight. Not necessarily Top Rank. It's happening in the United Kingdom. If it's happening in the UK, that means that Frank's promoting it, not Bob.
So it's not necessarily happening on Bob's dime, though at the same time, Bob still gets to provide content for his broadcast partner.
Bob's been promoting Artur Beterbiev since the beginning of 2019. In February, the fighter's been with the promotional outfit for approximately 3 or 4 years now. And in the last 3 or 4 years, due to extenuating circumstances, injury, unless we forget the pandemic, Bob has been unable to turn Artur Beterbiev into a marquee fighter, a big draw, in spite of Artur's fan-friendly style and his highlight reel knockouts.
In spite of Artur being a very accomplished fighter, he's the Unified Ring Magazine and lineal light heavyweight champion, but he still isn't a draw.
After 3 or 4 years or so with the promotional outfit, he's still not a big ticket seller. I mean,
he's not.
Why do you think a Canadian-based Russian Russian had to travel to New York City to fight Joe Smith Jr.? It's because in New York, Joe's more of a draw than Artur is. And why do you think he's traveling to London now to face Anthony Yarde? What is his mandatory challenger?
It's because in London, Anthony might be able to sell more tickets than Artur could in Canada.
If the Canadian-based Russian champion were any kind of a draw, well, both Anthony Yarde and Joe Smith Jr. would have had to travel to Canada to face him. But it's the opposite. It's the exact opposite. It's Artur that's doing all the traveling here, at least in his last two fights.
So the way the situation breaks down, Bob's got an aging, unified champion who he's had for approximately 3 or 4 years, and he just can't seem to turn him into a draw.
Thus, he's willing to loan him out to his old buddy Frank so that Frank can promote the show, so that Frank can promote the fight on his dime in the United Kingdom as opposed to the United States. And if Anthony upsets the apple cart for Artur, well, that's one less mouth to feed for Bob.
It is.
Can he do it, though? Can Anthony really upset the apple cart for Artur Beterbiev is the question. I happen to think that while Anthony has the right base style for the job and youth on his side, more freshness at least than Artur, who's coming up on 40.
What's this guy, 37, 38 years old?
Artur Beterbiev's got the kind of stopping power that keeps him in a fight from the first round to the final round. And he's not just a puncher, he's not just a bruiser, not just a brawler, he's a craftier boxer than he's given credit for. We saw that in his last fight opposite the ring, Joe Smith Jr., who thought stepping on the gas and imposing his will.
Came right at Artur Beterbiev. He charged him.
Where normally Artur Beterbiev is the aggressor, the man coming forward looking to invade the pocket, it was Joe Smith Jr. coming forward, stepping on the gas, stepping into his jab.
That's what got him countered by a big right hand over the top of the jab.
I don't think Anthony Yarde this upcoming Saturday will be as gung-ho as Joe Smith Jr. was. I think that the fight with Yarde will go a little longer than the fight with Joe did.
But can Anthony win?
Boxing being the theater of the unexpected, it's hard to rule anything out, though I'd wager that given Artur Beterbiev's amateur background, his amateur experience, and the fact that he's a craftier boxer than he's given credit for,
might feel out Anthony Yarde in that first round. See what the guy's got, see what his speed is like, what his power's like.
How he should approach this guy, how this guy responds, and then Artur will take it from there. I don't think for a second that Anthony is going to charge Artur the same way that Joe did. Anthony Yarde's likely going to look to roll punches off the shoulder, roll and counter.
Try to use Artur's offense against him to hit him with something he doesn't see and hit him hard.
Hurt him and get him down. He's been down before. Jeff Page knocked him down. Callum Johnson knocked him down. And it's conceivable that Anthony could too if he plays his cards right.
He's got the right base style for the job. He just ain't got the right experiences. That's what's working against Anthony in this fight.
He gassed out opposite the ring, then WBO champion Sergey Kovalev, and was stopped by a jab. He got beat by a jab in the Lyndon Arthur fight, the first one, even though he avenged the loss in the second.
I feel like what's working against Anthony Yarde is a lack of overall experience against this caliber of fighter and his gas tank, his energy reserves.
If Artur Beterbiev approaches Anthony Yarde's power and counterpunching carefully, but still applies pressure throughout, this could wear on Anthony Yarde's gas tank.
Because Artur Beterbiev sets a relentless pace for his matches, but he's not callous or careless or cavalier.
He's an educated pressure fighter. He doesn't just go out there winging shots. He's got a very short jab that's hard to counter.
Good punch selection, good uppercuts, mid-range to inside, good body shots.
And it doesn't really take him all that long to pile up the damage if he lands. So long as he lands, he can really hurt a guy, hurt him fast.
I mean, Artur Beterbiev, he's still the favorite. He may have one or two things working against him, the fact that he's aging and he is an injury-prone fighter.
But he is still the betting favorite. It's wishful thinking from Frank Warren, if it's anything.
He thinks Anthony Yarde will win, though most won't agree with him.
Most people, including the odds makers, think Artur's going to knock him out. Elsewhere, in the men's light heavyweight division, Eddie Hearn is pushing for Dimitri Bivol to fight Joshua Buatsi in the spring.
Not the first time we've heard about this fight.
Not the first time that we've talked about it here on the channel. And since then, my feelings haven't changed. I heavily favor Dimitri Bivol to, at minimum, outpoint Joshua Buatsi. Bivol will fight around the same time as Canelo Alvarez, April or May. Hearn told IFL TV, I would like for him to fight Joshua Buatsi, okay? If he beats Joshua Buatsi, Bivol will fight Canelo Alvarez. If Joshua Buatsi wins, he will probably fight Canelo Alvarez. But that is the way the light heavyweights are playing out. Hearn was pushing for a Bivol versus Buatsi fight last year, but he was overruled by the WBA, which ruled that Gilberto Ramirez Bivol's then mandatory, deserved to square off against the Russian. Hearn went so far as to submit a special request to bypass the mandate, but he was ultimately unsuccessful. Bivol went on to soundly outpoint Ramirez over 12 rounds in November in Abu Dhabi.
I remember around that time people were trying to say that Eddie Hearn was protecting Dimitri Bivol from Zurdo Ramirez.
Because what he wanted was for Dimitri to face his own fighter, Joshua Buatsi. I remember that narrative at that time. Now you tell me, based on the fight that we all saw, does Dimitri look like he needs protection from Zurdo?
Did he? I should say.
That's boxing for you these days. These guys grasp at straws and run with whatever narrative makes sense at that time, though they seldom ever age well. The idea that Dimitri Bivol had something to avoid and Zurdo Ramirez has aged like so many avocados.
Like so many avocados on so many breakfast bars.
In the same interview, Hearn also said that he wants his other top light heavyweight charge, Callum Smith, to fight the winner of the upcoming title unification bout between WBC, WBO, IBF light heavyweight champion Artur Beterbiev and Anthony Yarde this upcoming weekend.
We've talked about that in previous videos as well, and how it doesn't look like we're going to get the undisputed light heavyweight title fight between the winner of this weekend's fight and Dimitri Bivol.
Winner of this weekend's fight looks like they're going to be facing Callum Smith next, as there is a desire on both sides of the coin, a desire from the Matchroom side and a desire from the Queensberry promotion side to make the fight between the winner of this weekend's fight and Callum Smith. It seems that both sides want to do it.
Though who's going to end up with the rights for the fight is the question.
Will Eddie Hearn send Callum Smith over to Queensberry as easily as he sent John Ryder, or will a purse bid ensue?
Look, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, we got to get past this weekend's fight. And Dimitri Bivol may have to get past...
May have to get through Joshua Buatsi. I think that he can. I think that he will. My feelings haven't changed. Joshua Buatsi doesn't have the necessary experiences to ready him for this fight. And based on what I've seen so far, he's not prolific enough a puncher.
He's not busy enough with the lead hand, busy enough with the jab.
I am suspicious of Joshua Buatsi's gas tank. He fights at a very relaxed pace, very economic, and I fear that if he's forced to work,
He'll gas out. That's why he's so economic.
if he's forced to work, forced to fight a bit more than he normally does, his energy reserves may give out. I am also suspicious that Joshua Buatsi don't take the best punch, which is why he's so cautious, so careful. It's really only 1 or 2 shots at a time. He doesn't take very many chances, not particularly flashy.
Or active.
Active through a round, whereas comparatively, when we look at Dimitri Bivol, he can work from the outside coming in or from the inside moving out.
In and out. He's got more in and out game than Joshua Buatsi does. On the inside, haven't seen much from Joshua Buatsi.
In terms of inside game, whereas with Dimitri Bivol, we saw in his last fight that he's quite comfortable in the pocket and he can work there, put the other man on his back foot, even if the other man is naturally bigger.
Because Zurdo Ramirez is really just a cruiserweight boiling down to light heavyweight, and we all know it.
Joshua Buatsi is a more modest-sized light heavyweight and nowhere near as busy a puncher as Zurdo, so I very much like Dimitri Bivol's chances against him.